I'd just been to a funeral of the mother of a close friend of mine. And even though I wasn't close to her, I was close to him and to his children and the family around this woman who died. And it always made me feel calm and peaceful when I know a lot of people have it the other way around. They feel panic and worry when they think about dying. But for me, the actual act of disappearing or not existing anymore just it's a relief, it's a gift. It just means that the perspective we have from being here as us, like a separate sense of self, thinks that everything is so important. But then when you have the gift of actually everything disappearing, you realize, hey, wait a minute. It can't really be that important because after I'm dead, it doesn't matter. So that brings with it the conflict that is just gone. There is no conflict anymore. And at the same time, you can worry and feel like, oh, I would need it to be, and I'm so worried about not existing. That doesn't mean I can't fear having a violent death or a painful death. That's a very different thing, but the act of not existing really brings with it a gift of peacefulness, if you can see it in that light. And seeing my friend being so, he sang a beautiful song. I'm very impressed. I sang at my father's funeral, and I remember how incredibly difficult it was to stand up in front of people and sing when I was that sad. And it was very touching to see him sing that song, and that's when I started crying, because I could see how he was singing to his mother and how much he cared for her, and she had asked for this song on her funeral. And then her grandchild, I saw her sad, and that really made me tear up, because it's such a sweet little girl, and thinking of her missing her grandmother, death is such a final thing, and it's so difficult to deal with because we don't really know how to handle it. It's so final. Everything else we can deal with, we can buy a subscription, we can upgrade, we can get something else, we can replace it, but with this, there just is no negotiation. It's completely, there is no conflict, because death is dead. You can't do anything about that. Now, you might believe that something happens after, and I have absolutely no idea what happens after death, and it doesn't really matter from the perspective of where we are now. But conflict in death disappears. And if you ever followed anything I talk about when it comes to meditation and practicing and the sense of self, it's that when you become free from the sense of having a separate self, a sense of self, what I call non-centeredness, there's just no conflict. There's no conflict with anyone. That doesn't mean there's not situations where you disagree with people on what the right action is, but the feeling of having conflict is gone. And it's, in a sense, very similar to death, because in death it's the same way. There is no conflict in death because you're dead. You're so angry at your neighbor because they cut down part of your hedge, or they did something, a dog pooped on your lawn, or whatever it is you're angry with, or someone stole something from you, which sucks and that's really bad, and you shouldn't accept them doing that. But the feeling that needs to be a conflict, that it requires there to be a feeling of you fighting someone else. And when you die, that disappears because it doesn't matter anymore. If they pooped on your lawn, who cares? And it's the same with getting rid of the sense of self. There is no conflict anymore. And it's a really bizarre perspective to have when you're stuck feeling this way, because it feels so absolute that you have to be angry. That how could you enjoy life if something like that happened, if a dog pooped on your lawn? So I think it's a shame that in today's society we're so distant from death. It's seen as a failure somehow. We should look young until we're old, and we should just never grow old. Growing old is a failure. We should just look young and be on Instagram, Facebook pages like the whole time. Instagram, Facebook pages, that's a new concept, I think. So we're just not used to seeing death in that way and growing old. Instead of, in old societies, they saw age as wisdom, like you actually gain something. Today it's kind of the other way around. When people get buried, unfortunately in Sweden they cremate them, so you don't get to see the body. I think it's a beautiful thing to see a dead person, say, oh wow, this person's actually gone. Now we see an urn or ashes, and we can't really relate to that in the same way. And I think it's important to say goodbye and then move on. And in Sweden you have the funeral usually at a wedding, and then at a church, and then after that you go to a house that is usually, it's called a församlingshem. It's usually in association to the church somewhere, and you have a fika and you talk, and then you share memories, and everyone smiles, and it's kind of a way to reconciling the difficult part, but also just people being there for the people who are left behind, because dying is not difficult for the person dying. It's difficult for the people who are left behind, because we're the ones who have to deal with the conflict that's left. But for the person who actually passes away, the conflict is over, the fight is done. And it also makes you respect and feel understanding for other people, because everyone has a mother, everyone has a father, and most people have siblings, and when they pass away, it's a terrible thing. It doesn't matter if they're your enemies or not, it's still a terrible thing for them. And if people would just see from that perspective a bit more, then I think there could be less conflict, there could be less fighting, there could be less people who believe that other people should die because they don't believe the same way they do. And after death, it doesn't matter anyway. So I think death is something it's important to see, and not to hide it from our children, like, because we're so hid from it that they don't get to see that part of life. And it can really teach us something about living if we accept that we're going to die, and actually think about the fact that you will die. I mean, there's one thing I can tell you for certain, is that you will die. No matter what, you are going to die. That is a certainty, no matter what happens. And there's a sense of relief in that, because once you accept that, you don't have to fight it anymore. You can do everything you can to stay alive as long as possible, absolutely. But you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to die? Am I not going to die? What's going to happen? Because you know you're going to die. Facing difficult emotions can be, especially about death, can be very difficult for many people. I made a video here where you can watch and learn about one of the simplest ways of meditating that there is, and it's just super simple for anyone to get started that way. I highly recommend you doing that if you want to learn more about how to actually learn about living from dying.